You know how in every family there's that one golden child who could literally burn down the house, blame it on the dog, and still get a standing ovation? Yeah, in my family, that's my brother, Chad. And yes, his name is actually Chad. The name itself should have been my first clue. Last summer, my parents decided that Chad deserved a reward for, wait for it, just being himself. No Nobel Prize, no life-saving surgery, no groundbreaking invention. Just existing with that smug grin and those overpriced sunglasses. And their idea of a reward? Dropping 15 grand, yes, 15,000 US dollars on a luxury cruise that looked like a Kardashian Instagram fever dream. Meanwhile, I had just won the biggest award of my career, an achievement that took me years of sweat, caffeine, and emotional breakdowns to earn. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd throw me a party, or at least take me to Olive Garden. But nope. The only acknowledgement I got was a text from my mom that said, and I quote, "Congrats, sweetie, we'll celebrate later." Spoiler alert, later never came. Instead, they were too busy posting live videos from the cruise deck, sipping champagne, and showing off their exclusive access to some captain's dinner like they had just discovered Atlantis. And oh, the captions, stuff like, "Family first," and "So proud of our boy," as if I was some random intern who didn't make the cut for the group photo. Watching all that from my one-bedroom apartment, eating leftover pizza, I felt something snap. It wasn't just hurt, it was betrayal. Years of subtle digs, backhanded compliments, and accidental forgetfulness suddenly piled up like dirty laundry they never bothered to wash. I remembered all the times growing up when Chad got new sneakers while I got his hand-me-downs because they still had life in them. The times I aced exams and got a pat on the head, while Chad got a car for passing algebra with a C-. And that girlfriend, by the way, later cheated on him with his best friend. But my mom still invited her to Thanksgiving. That's my family. Loyalty so twisted it could qualify as toxic love. But this cruise? This was different. This was the grand finale, the ultimate slap in the face, like they were saying, "Hey, we know you just climbed Everest, but Chad found a cool-looking rock in the backyard, so he gets the trophy." And here's where the conspiracy theory comes in. Because I'm convinced this wasn't just favoritism. No, this was a full-on, long-term psychological operation designed to keep me in my supporting role in the family narrative. Think about it. If Chad is always the hero, then I'm always the background character, the one who hands him the sword, gives him the pep talk, and disappears before the credits roll. And maybe, just maybe, my parents liked it that way, because if I ever stepped into the spotlight, their golden boy's shine would look a little cheap. So I did what any rational, totally not hurt adult would do. I started planning my exit, not just from the situation, but from the whole family dynamic. Because here's the truth about revenge. It doesn't always start with rage. Sometimes it starts with silence. That night, while they were probably at some midnight buffet on the cruise ship, I sat in my kitchen and started deleting family group chats. I unfollowed them on Instagram, muted their updates, and even took their pictures off my fridge. And I'll be honest, it felt good. Almost too good, like that first sip of ice-cold Coke on a 100-degree day. I knew they'd notice eventually, and when they did, they'd probably spin it as, "Oh, she's just being sensitive again." But in my mind, this wasn't sensitivity. It was self-respect. I was done playing the loyal understudy in their toxic family drama. From that moment, I wasn't just walking away, I was rewriting the script. I moved cities the way people in witness protection move, quietly, with a plant I pretended to care about, and a duffel bag full of T-shirts that all said something ironic, like "World's Okayest Sibling." And I picked a studio apartment above a laundromat because the white noise felt like proof that I wasn't alone, just strategically unavailable. I told my new landlord my name was M, short for Emergency Exit, and he laughed like I'd made a joke, which technically I had. But underneath it was a small vow that I would no longer audition for the role of supporting character in The Church of Chad. And that vow tasted better than any dessert on their 15K cruise. Mornings started at a coffee shop, staffed entirely by baristas with doctoral theses in latte art and performative indifference, and I became one of those people who pretends to write a novel while actually writing a list called Things I Won't Apologize For, which included breathing loudly, winning awards, and not texting my mom back within 4 minutes, and for a while, the city let me cosplay as the main character in a coming-of-age movie scored by indie guitars and a little reverb. At night, I worked in a design studio that looked like a spaceship built by people who believed in fonts more than religion. And I poured myself into a project so audacious it made my old boss call me a risk to the brand. Translation, you might actually pull this off. And the more I worked, the less I doom-scrolled their cruise photos. Though occasionally the algorithm slipped me a shot of my parents grinning like they'd conquered Rome, while Chad posed with a towel folded into a swan, and it would jab me right under the ribs where betrayal hibernates. But I had therapy now, which is to say I had a therapist named Lacey who wore sneakers and spoke in metaphors about boundary fences. And she told me to visualize a velvet rope around my piece like I was my own A-list event. And if my family wanted access, they could stand outside with the paparazzi until security cleared their names. And yes, the bouncer was me too, because in this economy, you have to wear multiple hats. So I practiced saying things like, "I'm not available for that conversation," into my bathroom mirror. And honestly, the mirror clapped. And just when I started to believe the spell that I could reinvent myself the way people reinvent salad as bowls, my phone lit up with an unknown number from a 305 area code, which I wasn't going to answer because Miami equals chaos, but my thumb betrayed me and slid right, and a calm voice said he was a lawyer representing certain members of your family. And I thought, great. The cruise line is suing them for emotional damage caused by Chad's playlist. The lawyer, who introduced himself as Sinclair like he'd been named after a trust fund and a cigar, explained that some financial entanglements had emerged post-cruise. And by entanglements he meant my brother had apparently attempted to launch a startup selling subscription boxes of artisanal air, curated oxygen experiences, and a venture capitalist who specialized in disruption, mostly of other people's lives, had fronted him cash. And then the company combusted because it turns out people don't want to pay $49.99 a month to inhale vibes. And now the VC wanted repayment. And guess who'd co-signed the loan after 3 mimosas and a speech about belief and family and the American dream? My parents, of course, high on the ship's buffet and the narcotic scent of Chad's eternal potential. Sinclair gently mentioned the words lean and house in the same sentence, which felt like an earthquake under my new velvet rope, then added, like a waiter suggesting dessert, that my parents were hoping I might provide guidance or resources. And the phrase resources made me laugh out loud, because it sounded like I was FEMA. For the first time in our long history of toxic love disguised as wholesome family values, I had leverage. And in the quiet that followed, I could hear a tiny chorus in my chest whisper, "Revenge, revenge, revenge," which, to be fair, is Latin for boundaries with mascara. I told Sinclair I'd consider a meeting if future communications went through email because nothing says I'm in control like scheduling a crisis into a tidy calendar block. And when I hung up, I stared at my wall of sticky notes. Ideas, deadlines, a doodle of the captain's hat I would never wear. And I realized something delicious. My project at the studio, the audacious one, was a partnership proposal with a global brand that just so happened to be the ex-client Chad had ghosted during his entrepreneur arc after a scandal involving some creative bookkeeping and an intern who discovered a cheating spreadsheet labeled creative revenue, where creative meant imaginary. And rumor had it, the brand vowed never to work with anyone who shared chromosomes with my brother. A sane person would have disclosed my last name and disqualified us early. But destiny and HR sometimes take naps, and I'd used my middle name on the paperwork and let my work speak louder than genealogy, and the brand had loved the pitch so much they'd invited me to a final round showcase in 2 weeks, winner to receive a contract that could pay off several people's mistakes plus interest. The universe was setting a table. On one side, betrayal with a side of liens, on the other, a chance to flip the whole script like a griddle pancake. Still, the ghost of my childhood perched on my shoulder whispering, "Be the bigger person, help your family, forgive, forget." And I answered out loud, "Being bigger doesn't mean being a doormat with biceps," which startled the plant and possibly the laundromat below. That night I dreamed I was on their cruise ship. Only it was shaped like a credit card and it kept swiping itself, and every time it dinged, the deck tilted until I slid toward the ocean and Chad threw me a life ring made of gold foil balloons that spelled sorry. And I woke up laughing because even my subconscious has a writer's room. Lacey asked me what I wanted, not what I should do. And the answer arrived like a text from a number I already knew. I wanted accountability, not apologies, repair instead of performance. A family that didn't treat me like the emergency fund they resented. And if that made me the villain in Chad's story, well, every hero needs an upgrade. So I drafted an email to Sinclair with 3 sentences. I'm willing to meet. It must be on my terms. Bring documents. Then I put on my best "I'm the adult now" jacket and walked to work, past a billboard advertising miracle cruises with the tagline, "We make memories," and I thought, same, but mine will be itemized, notarized, and paid in full. The meeting was set for Saturday at 2 p.m., which, in family politics, is the passive-aggressive time slot, late enough that lunch is awkward, early enough that no one can claim they're too busy. I decided the venue would be neutral territory, a hotel conference room that smelled faintly of ambition and carpet cleaner, the kind of place where pyramid scheme conventions are born. I arrived early because being first means you control the seating arrangement, power move 101. I put my chair at the head of the table, positioned so the sunlight came in behind me, giving me the kind of halo effect usually reserved for saints and cult leaders. I'd even brought a manila folder stuffed with blank paper just so I could open it dramatically, like I was holding state secrets. When they walked in, my parents looking like they'd just come from a Costco sample table, and Chad in a hoodie that probably cost more than my rent, I almost laughed. Chad gave me a smile that was supposed to be charming, but landed somewhere between car salesman and Netflix true crime suspect. My mom clutched her tote bag like it contained the original Constitution, and my dad looked at the coffee setup like it was a moral test. They opened with small talk, which is the family equivalent of foreplay before a bad idea, but I didn't bite. Sinclair, the lawyer with the name of a yacht, slid a folder toward me. This one actually had papers, and launched into the spiel. Debts, threats, pending legal action. A particularly aggressive voicemail from the venture capitalist that ended with, "And tell Chad I'm keeping the mug." I flipped through the documents slowly, pausing just long enough to make them squirm. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined. Chad's business, Breathe Premium, had somehow managed to rack up expenses in places where air is free. There were invoices for oxygen harvesting retreats, energy alignment consultants, and, my personal favorite, emergency aura polishing. My parents tried to justify it as an investment in his future, which sounded noble until you remember they'd ignored mine completely. This was the betrayal Olympics, and they were going for gold. I could feel my inner conspiracy theorist stretching her legs. Maybe this wasn't incompetence at all. Maybe they'd been running an elaborate money laundering scheme under the guise of family love, and Chad was just the pretty decoy. After all, who would suspect a man who once tried to microwave a salad? Then, just when I thought the absurdity had peaked, Chad leaned forward and said, "Look, I know I messed up, but you've always been the responsible one. You're like the safety net." And he said it with the same tone you'd use to compliment someone's banana bread, and for a split second I imagined flipping the table. But instead, I smiled, The kind of smile that says, I've already written the ending to this story, and you're not going to like it. Here's the twist. 2 days earlier, I'd gotten the official green light from the global brand I'd been pitching. Not only did they love my design concept, they wanted me to spearhead their North American expansion. The contract amount was enough to erase Chad's debt twice over and still leave room for me to buy something petty, like a billboard that says, "See, it wasn't me." And here's the spicy part. They had no idea I was related to Chad. They'd cut ties with him years ago after his creative bookkeeping stunt, and if they knew my last name, they might think twice. So I told my family the truth, but only part of it. I said I might be in a position to help, but that it would come at a price. And that price was not money. It was control. If I stepped in, they would sign over decision-making power for all future family financial matters to me. Every single one. My dad blinked like I'd just suggested we move to Mars. My mom started to protest, but I held up a hand and said, "No more cruises, no more oxygen startups, no more surprise liens on the house because Chad found a new vision. You want my help? You play by my rules." Chad's jaw tightened. "You can't just take over the family," he said, which was hilarious coming from the man who'd practically franchised our last name for personal gain. "Oh, I can," I replied, "and I will. Consider it revenge for every Thanksgiving I spent hearing about your GPA as if it were the stock market." Sinclair looked from me to them, probably calculating his billable hours, and said, "Legally, it's feasible." My parents exchanged a glance, the kind of glance that said they knew they were cornered but couldn't admit it without losing face. Finally, my mom exhaled dramatically, like she was giving birth to the decision, and said, "Fine." I pulled a contract from my manila folder. Yes, I'd brought one, pre-written and waiting. Watching them sign was like watching history being rewritten in real time. When the last signature hit the page, I slid the folder back into my bag and stood up. "Great," I said. "Now that we're all on the same page, I'll handle it." As they left, Chad tried to soften the blow with, "Thanks, sis, I owe you one." I stopped at the door, turned back, and said, "No, Chad, you owe me 15 years. And I swear, for the first time in his life, he didn't have a comeback. Walking out of that hotel, I felt like I'd just staged a coup d'etat. Only instead of tanks, I'd used leverage. And instead of soldiers, I had my own stubborn will. The game had changed, and for the first time, I was the one writing the rules. And the first rule was simple: never let betrayal go uninvoiced. 2 weeks later, I was standing in a glass-walled conference room 31 floors above the city, wearing my best I'm rich in both ideas and spite outfit, presenting my design concept to the executives of the global brand that Chad had once scorched earth on. Outside the window, the skyline looked like it was leaning in to listen, which was fitting because the tension in the room could have been bottled and sold as premium suspense. My pitch wasn't just a design, it was a blueprint for a full-scale rebrand, the kind of thing that makes CEOs weep into their artisanal cold brew. When I finished, there was silence, the expensive kind, followed by the VP saying, "We'd like to move forward." Just like that, the contract was mine. The number on it could have bought my parents' house, Chad's dignity, and still leave enough to fund a scholarship for children whose siblings get all the attention. The brand wanted a launch event, big, flashy, impossible to ignore. And that's when the little devil of poetic justice tapped me on the shoulder and whispered, "Do it." Bashi. So I booked the same hotel ballroom my parents had used for Chad's engagement party, the one to the fiancée who later cheated on him with his gym trainer. Family history is just a stack of Lifetime movie scripts. The invite list? All the industry names, local press, potential investors, and my parents. Oh, and Chad. Of course, Chad. The night of the event, the place looked like a movie set where the budget got accidentally doubled. Floor-to-ceiling screens played looping visuals of the brand's new identity, my work, while servers glided around with champagne flutes like they had been trained at some secret hospitality dojo. I made my entrance just as the spotlight hit the stage, every inch the protagonist they'd tried to keep in the background. My parents sat at a table near the front, looking slightly lost, like tourists who'd wandered into the wrong tour group. Chad wore a suit that screamed, "I borrowed this for court," and his date looked like she'd RSVP'd for the free bar. I took the mic. Good evening. Tonight is about transformation, reinvention, and proving that no matter how far you've been underestimated, the right moment can flip the story. I could feel their eyes on me, confusion, realization, a dash of regret. For years, I continued, I believed my role in my family was to be the safety net. But I've learned that sometimes the best safety net is one you build for yourself, and then rent out at market value. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but it wasn't just about the joke. It was about watching me own the narrative. Halfway through, I unveiled the brand partnership on the giant screens, complete with the logo, the contract terms, the public-friendly version, not the juicy NDA stuff, and my name in a font so large it could be seen from space. Gasps, applause, phones snapping photos. And then came the final twist. The brand had agreed to sponsor a community reinvestment fund that I would oversee. Money earmarked for creative projects that actually had potential, not just artisanal air. This wasn't charity. This was legacy. After the speeches, people milled around, sipping drinks, networking. My parents approached me hesitantly, like I might bite. My mom said, "We're proud of you." Proud. It was the kind of statement that might have meant more years ago, but now felt like a Yelp review for a diner that finally got the order right. My dad offered a handshake, formal, stiff, like I was a business associate. "Chad?" He just smirked and said, "Guess you're the golden child now." I leaned in and replied, "No, Chad, I'm the adult now. There's a difference." And the rest of the night was a blur of congratulations and contract talk, but somewhere between dessert and the after-party, I caught my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. I looked calm, like someone who'd finally stepped out of the shadow and realized the sunlight was warmer than she'd been told. The next morning, headlines in the local business paper called me the designer who resurrected a fallen brand. My inbox was full. My phone was buzzing. And my parents? They had their financial mess cleaned up, but with the new rulebook I'd written, there was no going back to the old dynamic. I didn't just flip the script. I rewrote the sequel, cast myself as the lead, and made sure everyone knew who was holding the pen. Because here's the thing about revenge. The best kind doesn't end in destruction. It ends in ownership of the narrative, of the power, of the future. And for the first time in my life, that future was entirely mine.